About this linebacker, DeMarvion Overshown. He suffered a knee injury. It looks to be fairly significant. They're waiting for results for that. That could be a potentially big blow to their linebacker corps down in Dallas. In Green Bay, fullback Henry Pearson suffered a knee injury against the New England Patriots. Down in Jacksonville, outside lineman Chandler Brewer suffered a shoulder injury. In Miami, rookie running back, he's having a great camp. Devon Achane suffered a shoulder injury, according to Coach Mike McDaniels. It was feared to be something different initially, so that's decent news coming out of Miami. Terrible day yesterday if you were Mama Williams. Mama Williams had both her boys cut from NFL teams at the same day. The Giants cut one, the Eagles cut the other. Gene, what was it like in the Williams household, you think, yesterday when both Mama Williams boys get cut? And one of them was by your Eagles.
You're talking about Greedy, right?
Yeah.
So it's funny you say that because just on Birds Deep on Thursday night, we were talking about the roster and we were talking about different guys that were going to be a lock to make the team. And I was like, Eli Ricks has to make the team. Eli Ricks is the undrafted free agent cornerback that we took out of Alabama, but his best success was when he played for LSU. He was incredible. So he's looked great this preseason. He's looked great in training camp. They love Josh Jobe. They took Keely Ringo in the 4th round. So we were talking about who's going to be the odd man out. Are they going to cut Jobe? Are they going to cut Ringo? Are they going to cut Ricks? And I said on Birds Deep, I said, I don't think Greedy Williams is a lock to make the team. I think what they wanted to do was to see if he can compete for the safety spot and be like kind of like that hybrid like they did with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson last year. But when it was very clear that Reed Blankenship was having a great camp and he wasn't moving up the cornerback depth chart, I said, I don't think he's a lock to make the team, guys. I think Greedy Williams will end up getting cut before the season starts. And sure as hell, the Eagles cut their 4th cornerback because they're going to end up keeping 6. And I'm telling you right now, Keely Ringo and Eli Ricks are the future in the NFL. I don't care where you got them. These are elite playmakers at the cornerback position. And when Slay and Bradbury move on, the future is bright.
And gentlemen, 2 of the biggest injuries in the league yesterday, cornerback Isaiah Bolden in New England and quarterback John Wolford down in Tampa Bay. Both of these guys suffered injuries to where they had to be carted off the field. The good news is that they have feeling in all their extremities. They seem to be doing okay despite some scary situations on the field. But before we jump into the Friday highlights, Chase, I want to throw this your direction. Very similar injuries, scary injuries. Both benches clear to come out to support the players that were injured. Really, Damar Hamlin-esque type vibe. Obviously not as serious injuries as a result, but for a moment you had those flashbacks. You're kind of in that mindset. One of those games was cut short. The Patriot game was ended early. It happened early in the 4th quarter. The injury in the Bucs game, I believe, was late in the 3rd quarter. That game went to its finish. Chase, do you have any issue with one game being cut short and the other game not being cut short? Is it interesting to you that the NFL doesn't seem to have, a protocol for this type of situation? I don't have an issue with the game ending or not ending. I don't think that's the issue. I'm a big fan of consistency, though. I like when, we have rules and, we have a roadmap when it comes to these situations. And I have to look at this situation and say to myself, okay, what happens if this happens during the regular season? Because clearly we weren't on the same page for the preseason as far as ending the game or continuing the game. So what do you think, Chase, the NFL does as far as moving forward? Do you have any issue with one game ending and the other not? Am I making too much of this? It is kind of early on a Sunday.
Well, no, I wouldn't say you're making too much of it, but, it is a good question to ask. However, from my point of view, I think a lot of these situations have to be evaluated, granted, in the midst of it. It's easy for us as spectators to sit back and go, well, we should have consistency and we should have, whatnot. But I mean, if you're those officials and those health experts on the field, and you're making a knee-jerk reaction at the time, you feel like that's the right choice. So I agree that the NFL should have something, especially after Damar Hamlin. And then, you had 2 situations like that on Friday. I think the NFL needs to, maybe maybe make it more clear so that the officials and the medical professionals can make a clear, sound decision before moving forward.
And Gene, to Chase's point, there has to be at least a discussion in the league, right? Like, because at the end of the day, obviously the safety is the most important thing. And at the end of the day, as fans, we don't really care if they cancel a preseason game. It doesn't impact anything. It is what it is. As fans, we're not upset. Overall, it doesn't really impact the shape of the season. But if it happens regular season, Gene, we have to figure that out, right? We need to know what we do during the actual game. And then behind the scenes, there has to be a plan moving forward, right?
I think with Damar Hamlin, it really kind of woke up a lot of people in the league, right? So the NFL's plan was to continue and carry on. The players made that decision in that game with Damar Hamlin. That wasn't the NFL being all like, oh, we really care about the player's safety. Their plan was to get him to a hospital and we'll continue to play in 5 minutes. The players made that decision, right? So now, because of the backlash that happens throughout the league, as far as, they didn't care, and the NFL hears this, and Goodell has to come out and make a PR statement and be like, oh no, we were always going to cancel the game based off that situation. I think that right now, no official wants to be on the crew that keeps a game going when someone's seriously injured or seriously hurt. And they don't want to have that responsibility of being like, wow, he didn't even care about us. He just wanted to continue the game. But come regular season, they have to have a protocol. It has to be something because, guys, I hate to say this, but we watch NFL. It's a brutal sport. It's not like UFC when someone gets knocked out. We can kind of like, okay, let's make sure he's revived before we start the next match. It's much more barbaric, and there's going to be guys all year that go down with neck injuries, that go down with concussions, that have scary, scary injuries. And in reality, unless it's a situation like Damar Hamlin where a player dies on the field, you got to continue the game. That's kind of got to be the MO. It's not like they thought they were signing up to play flag football. They know the risk and responsibilities of walking onto an NFL field. We're not hiding it. We're not pulling the wool from anyone's head, from anyone's eyes and saying, they don't know what they're doing. So the protocol has to be the show must go on unless it's a serious, serious condition like what happened with Damar Hamlin on the field, especially in prime time. I got a question for you, and I just kind of want to spin this. If that game was Sunday afternoon at 1:30 p.m. or 1 o'clock p.m., do you think that game still would have got stopped?
I think the players still have the reaction.
Players and the coaches made that decision, and I think it never would have continued in that fashion. No.
Are we talking about the Damar Hamlin game?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think prime time really played into it.
I think the NFL, because it was prime time, I think Gene is right, but maybe Gene and I don't agree. But the reason why I think prime time played a factor into it is because I think the NFL was pushing like, hey, this is prime time. There's a lot of people watching. We need to continue this game.
Okay.
Whereas Sunday at 1:30, when there's other NFL games going on, I think the NFL would have been like, yo, get everybody off the field, cancel the game, to send the fans home. Let's call it a day.
That's an interesting reaction. I didn't think of it that way.
That's
I think because it was prime time and because the whole nation is watching Sunday Night Football, I think the NFL was like, hey, we have to continue this game.
And
I will say this, though.
The whole nation watching it. The whole nation is tweeting about it and, on social media about it. The social media takes during a primetime NFL game compared to the 1 o'clock slate where you got 8 or 9 games going. Yep. I mean, it was instant reaction the minute he went down.
Well, I will say this. You look at that scenario, and I think one of the worst things that come from that scenario that happened with Damar Hamlin was the amount of people that were responding with worrying about what happens in their fantasy football matchup. That drove me nuts. That was fantasy football championship week. That was Monday Night Football. Right. So what happens with fantasy football? Dude, a guy died on the field. Split the money and let's talk about it next year. Like, that's not what our concern needs to be.
Yeah.
Hey, there was a lot of money on the line.
100%.
Split it.
That's right. Split it and move on, guys. All right, let's talk about Friday. All right. Well, we got a lot of preseason games to break down. We're going to start with the Friday lineup. And gentlemen, I'll be honest with you. When it comes to what we saw initially on Friday from Daniel Jones, it wasn't terrible. I think it was right along lines with what we expect from Daniel Jones, but it does seem he has a new favorite target in New York, Darren Waller, and that might be a little bit concerning. Chris, we all know Darren Waller's not great history with the Raiders when it comes to wanting to play, being willing to play, playing through injuries to be available to his team. If Darren Waller ends up becoming one of Daniel Jones's favorite and most thrown to targets this season, do you see that being an issue potentially for the Giants offense?
Well, I think that's the reason they brought him in. What's the whole reason they signed him is to help Daniel Jones. Listen, Daniel Jones needs all the help he can get when it comes to throwing the ball. And look, I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not a huge Daniel Jones fan. I don't even think he's a starting NFL quarterback. I think he's absolutely terrible. But that's why they brought Darren Waller in. And that's, if those two connect and that's what needs to be done, there's the Giants offense for you. I just I don't see anything outside the hash marks then as far as Daniel Jones passing. So
I will say this. When you look at the Giants preseason game, the thing that stands out to me in both preseason games isn't Darren Waller. I'm never going to be behind Darren Waller. He's a quitter. And when you quit on a football team, when you quit on your brothers, when you quit on everybody that's on the field, I feel like he'll find a reason. It's like boxing, right? Fighting. Everybody, your brain registers two things when you get punched in the mouth. It's go forward or get back. Get the hell in or get the hell out. I'll say this. The one person that really is off the pages with Daniel Jones is Jalen Hyatt, wide receiver out of Tennessee. You want to talk about a guy that's got Tyreek Hill burner speed. They said he ran faster than Tyreek Hill, broke his record 23.7 miles per hour on the field, and he's got 2 touchdowns in 2 games. Now, he left the injury. He left due to a slight injury, which he's fine, but he's led the Giants in targets, receptions, and touchdowns and yards for the first 2 preseason games combined. So Jalen Hyatt's the person I think that steps up and becomes the Giants' number 1 target, because I think Darren Waller will quit like he always does.
And Chase, doesn't matter. At the end of the day, let's say Hyatt does step up and that is, Daniel Jones's guy and he puts up numbers. Is that going to shift potentially where the Giants finish in this division this season? Or at the end of the day, it is what it is. The Giants are going to be middle of the pack, maybe fringe playoff team, maybe, or do you see this potentially elevating them to more?
I think it could. But I think the main concern for the New York Football Giants is going to be Saquon Barkley. How is Saquon Barkley going to move forward and help contribute to this team? I think Darren Waller's a great piece to have for Daniel Jones, as long as, like Gene said, he doesn't quit. There seems to be I think it's good for Darren Waller to get in New York, because there seems to be a little bit of a culture in Vegas. And I'm a Chiefs fan, and I despise the Raiders. Can't stand them. If I was going to put a toilet bowl in the United States, it would be wherever the Raiders are, whether it's Vegas, Oakland, or Los Angeles. So yeah, the culture in Vegas with the Raiders is completely different than what it is with the New York Giants. So I think it could help them. Absolutely.
In Carolina this week, we saw Bryce Young again. We were anticipating to see what he showed us in week 2. It was similar to week 1, and coming out of it, I don't have a lot of questions about Bryce Young. Granted, he hasn't shown us much, but I still come out of it with the same thought of, how are they going to protect him, Gene? Because this is the second preseason game where he's getting hit a lot. And let's be honest, they're not facing the type of defensive talent they're going to be facing on a regular basis once the season begins. Do you see this magically getting better in Carolina? Or is this going to be a Carr situation from Houston 12 years ago where he just keeps getting hit over and over again?
Well, what the problem is, he's a right-handed quarterback, and the right side of the line is terrible. It's not the left side of the line that's the issue. It's the right side of the line. If you watch Bryce Young's tape in Alabama, his right tackle is probably more important to him than his left. He bails right almost all the time. When he scrambles throwing side. all the time. And they have their right guard out and their right tackle is a traffic cone. So that's not going to change, right? So the only way it'll change is if Frank Wright creates that zone running scheme to be able to hold that defensive end down, which he's done with Jonathan Taylor, which he's done in Philadelphia. You have to be able to keep that edge rusher from peeling his ears back. They got to stay out of third and long situations to where you know that they're 100% passing. I think that Carolina Panthers are going to win the division still. I truly believe that they have the best coach quarterback combination in that division, and I think their defense is very good. So yes, their offensive line looks sticky. They could do they have salary cap space. They could go pick somebody up in the free agency market after cuts. They could bring somebody in, but that right side of that line will get better once their right guard gets back from injury. Austin Corbett, hopefully he gets back. I don't know how long he's going to be out for, but Taylor Moton is essentially a traffic cone. So he's been awful, and I don't know what you go to. They don't have depth there, right? You can't just go to your backup right tackle. Their left side's fine. Brady Christensen, Ike Ekwonu, those guys know what they're doing. Even their center, Bradley Bozeman, they're good. They're okay. It's the right side of the line that's the issue. Maybe they can add a tight end over there to Chip to be able to help around that right side, but they have to protect his right side.
And you're right. It's something they need to figure out because he does favor that side. And it's easier. Let's be honest. You're not going to teach him not to go right. That is what he's comfortable with. That is what he's been doing probably since middle school. He goes right. So you need to figure out something on the right side, because you're not going to tell him don't go right, because that's going to create a whole different level of issue if you try to change that on him. Chris,
you've seen did you see some of his biggest highlights versus Georgia? They were all rollout rights. The shuffle pass to the running back, the bomb to Jamison Williams, they were all rollouts to the right. So he's definitely comfortable moving to the right.
Sticking in that division, Chris, Atlanta Falcon fan was puffing their chest this weekend because they were apparently super impressed with what Desmond Ridder did during his preseason performance. And I'll be honest, I was like, okay, he didn't go in there and he didn't go Barkley it. So that was nice to see. But I didn't come away feeling like, oh my God, Atlanta's going to win their division. But Chris, for some reason, Falcon fan is now fully aboard this Desmond Ridder train. Did you see anything spectacular from Desmond?
I didn't see anything I didn't see anything spectacular. However, he did look much better. I mean, it is his, it's a new year. He's been around the offense for his second year. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens down there in Atlanta. I didn't see anything spectacular, but I do believe Desmond Ridder is on his way to becoming an NFL quarterback. And I think that whole situation in Atlanta is ripe to become one of the top offenses in the NFL. Not that they have a good defense, but top offense.
Me and you are going to completely disagree there. I think Atlanta is going to be one of the worst teams in football this year. I think Desmond Ridder is not an NFL quarterback, and I think if they have any chance of competing for the division, they need to hand the reins to Taylor Heineke. I don't think that Desmond Ridder is ever going to compete there, and I think the strength of that defense, the strength of that team right now is going to be their defense. I really believe that. I think that they added some key additions in the offseason. They added Jeffrey Okudah to play opposite it's slipping my name, one of the top corners in football. It's more early morning. Let me get my coffee kicking. But they added some depth on that defense as a whole. So I think that the Atlanta Falcons will be better defensively than they are offensively. And I don't know how I forgot A.J. Terrell's name, but they added Jesse Bates in that secondary. They added Bud Dupree. They still have Grady Jarrett and Calais Campbell up front. I think that Atlanta's defense will carry them through more games, but I think they're going to be one of the worst teams in football. I think them and the Raiders and Arizona, obviously, compete for the Caleb Williams sweepstakes.
Well, that Chase loves hearing anyone talk bad about the Raiders, so he's
Absolutely.
all for that. But Chase, what did you see from Bijan Robinson? I know that a lot of this is going to predicate on whether or not the line can do anything and open up holes for him. A lot of it is going to predicate on whether or not Ridder can keep them in situations where they actually can run the ball, because if they're operating out of second and long and third and long, that's going to take away some opportunities from him. But just based on some early spurts from the preseason, do you think he potentially at this time was worth being picked as high as he was.
No. I mean, he could be utilized as a weapon, in the backfield with the pass game. But, you talk about Desmond Ridder. It's preseason, guys. Like, let's not over exaggerate or overreact. I mean, like Falcon fans are doing. Desmond Ridder went 7 for 9 and threw a pick. I mean,
Exactly.
like, I mean, if that one pick was a touchdown, maybe, just maybe I could see people getting hyped up, but 7 for 9 with a pick. And then he's out the game. Like, let's calm down. I agree with Gene. I think they've got the pieces on defense to be halfway decent. I don't know if they are the worst team in the NFC South. I would argue that Tampa Bay could be. But I think they will be competing with Tampa Bay for the last in division.
If you want to talk overreaction Sundays, I read a headline this morning, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's going to give the gist to you guys. Malik Willis solidifies himself as Tennessee backup quarterback. That was the headline. So I didn't personally watch the Titans game, so I was like, oh, let me go look at the highlights real quick. This man went 10 for 17. He didn't pass for 100 yards. He threw a pick. He had a touchdown. He had 13 carries, I think, for 90 yards, which, okay, that's fine. He also had a fumble. That is solidifying the backup quarterback position. This is a man last year who couldn't complete passes. He couldn't throw 15 yards down the field and hit someone who, by NFL standards, was wide open. But now, Gene, we're all of a sudden talking about that's the performance week 2 of the preseason. That clinch is Levis that bad? Is that what we're saying at this point? That's what it takes to clinch that spot?
So there's a lot of things that come out in these preseason. I don't know why my group of friends or the group of people that I watch football with are more spot on than some NFL GMs. I hate that, right? So like it was so easy to see, and I got to give this man credit. Dante Sell from East Coast Gridiron. We share a similar opinion on a lot of these last 3 players that you just talked about. Malik Willis, Will Levis, and Bijan Robinson. I don't think Bijan Robinson's the best running back in this class. I don't think he's the second best running back in this class. I had him ranked 3rd on my running back ratings coming out behind Jahmyr Gibbs and Zach Charbonnet. And I thought Devin Achane would be better than him also. But you got to understand what's going on in Miami. Let's see what ends up happening. But I love Devin Achane. So he's really changed 3 and 4 essentially where I have him coming out. So I think he's a very overhyped running back. They had a 1,000-yard rusher last year with Tyler Algier, and that offensive line is good. So Bijan will look good this year. Let's move on from that. Malik Willis. This guy played against real good college competition twice, and he looked terrible both games. Ole Miss, who every team in the SEC scored 40 points on, he scored 3 when he went up against Matt Corral and Liberty played Ole Miss. And then you want to talk about Will Levis. Do you guys know who Sean Clifford is? Sean Clifford is the quarterback for Penn State. He was the quarterback there for like 7 years. It's like a 7-year senior coming out. He's a backup quarterback for the Packers right now. He beat out Will Levis for the starting job in Penn State. And Sean Clifford is nothing more than a journeyman. Like, he shouldn't beat out Will Levis. Will Levis made terrible decisions last year. I looked at the quarterback rankings coming in this year, and I don't know if it's what it is. I think Malik Willis stinks, and I think Will Levis stinks. I think Tannehill's the only guy there, right? But I looked at the quarterback rankings coming out, and somehow, some way, those 2 guys, Anthony Richardson and Will Levis, were ranked 3 and 4 ahead of Hendon Hooker. And I'm like, are you guys watching these football games? Like, what are you going off of when they're naked throwing 50-yard bombs down the field with no pads on and no defenders? That's not what the NFL is. If you want Jay Cutler, I can show you Jay Cutler. He's sitting on the bench in Tennessee. And that's his ceiling. His ceiling is Jay Cutler. I think both of them aren't good. And I think if we're being honest with ourselves, I think they need to work with Ryan Tannehill and admit to themselves that they just blew 2 picks in the last 2 years on quarterbacks that aren't going to work out in the NFL.
I think with these guys like Malik, he's a highlight guy. You put together these highlights, and because he can run, and that's a big component, because a lot of times with these quarterbacks who are just athletically gifted, who can run the football, you see these highlights where a lot of it is running. And and a lot of them is putting moves bigger and slower guys, and they sprinkle in a little bit of the passing stuff, and you walk away thinking, wow, look at that guy. He can do some of the stuff Mahomes, no, he cannot. I saw Patrick Mahomes yesterday get chased down by 4 defenders, have a 5th defender pin him against the sideline, and he goes full Superman throw and delivers almost an accurate ball. That ball was almost caught by his receiver. He is falling out of bounds, 1 foot, and still has the cannon to get. Nobody should be compared to Patrick. I am so tired of hearing guys who can run the ball be like, oh, he's got a little Mahomes. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. Chase, you tell me. No one has that little bit of Mahomes in them. Tell them to stop it.
No, and and it's crazy because we're in preseason and he's doing this stuff. I mean, no, nobody's. They've done it with who did they do it with? I can't think of anybody right off the top of my head, but I know they've done it a couple of times, and it's just it's crazy. So no, nobody's on that level right now. And
they did it with Zach Wilson.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
They did.
Like, oh, this guy's Patrick Mahomes-esque. Like, what? What are you watching?
Yeah, and the only person that and like I said, I could be biased, but to me, the only person that is on Mahomes-esque level is Tom Brady, and Tom Brady's gone. So
speaking of Zach Wilson, he had a spectacular play yesterday with his feet. I saw the highlight. I was like, oh, okay. I watched the highlights of him throwing the ball, and I was like, oh, yep, there's Zach Wilson. But G, my question is this: do the Jets have let's get both sides of it. One, do you think they should try to trade him? Because obviously Aaron is older. The O-line is having some issues. If Aaron goes down, you want somebody back there that can step in and maybe do something. I don't know if Zach Wilson is that guy. But at the same time, you invested so much in getting Zach Wilson. It hasn't worked out. Do you try to recoup as much as you can based off whatever he looks like this preseason? If you can find someone who will give you, I don't know, a 5th round pick for him, a 6th round pick for him, do you pull the trigger on that move? Or do you hang on to him in case there's an injury issue with Aaron this season?
Well, I mean, you do realize Aaron Rodgers is 39 years old. He's not going to be there forever, probably 2 years. And if I'm being honest with you, I would probably just let Zach Wilson ride out those next 2 years as our backup quarterback, see if he develops. And in year 4, you can kind of see what you have with him, right? No, there's no way in a league full of teams begging for backup quarterbacks. Like, we're arguing in Philadelphia, should we cut Marcus Mariota, who was a starter, and how bad he's been in our preseason? Why are we going out there trying to trade for Zach Wilson to be what? A backup quarterback somewhere? Where is he going to start? Is Tampa Bay going to start over with him instead of Baker? Like, I don't understand it. No, the answer would be, let's develop him in-house. We've already made the mistake. And credit to the Jets for admitting they made that mistake and going out and getting a quarterback immediately, right? Good GMs, or every GM makes a mistake, right? Good GMs notice that mistake quickly and make a decision quickly and swiftly to fix that mistake. Joe Douglas has done a great job up there in New York, with the exception of the Zach Wilson pick. I think that they'll sit there and let him develop for a couple years behind Aaron Rodgers.
Speaking of mistakes, we have to bring up the quarterback situation in San Francisco. So Purdy, we got our first look at Brock Purdy after the injury. We saw the reports of all the picks he was throwing during camp. We were wondering, what does the elbow look like? What does the arm look like? He wasn't in there long. He went 4 for 5. He made a handful of throws. I think San Francisco fan walks away saying, okay, he looks all right. He doesn't look like he's too hampered by the elbow. It looks like we could be on track. Trey Lance comes in, leads a game-winning drive. I would argue that's the best he's looked in his limited playing time as a 49er. Another good sign for that quarterback room. And then you have the next coming of Steve Young in Sam Darnold sitting there on the bench, waiting to get his opportunity in San Francisco. I'm going to give you the same question I gave Gene, only with the San Francisco spin. What does that quarterback room look like if you're the one in charge? Are you trying to move Trey Lance out and recoup something for what you gave up to draft him in the first place? Do you keep all 3 quarterbacks and see if you can continue developing Lance, because he's not developed yet. And he definitely has, I think, more potential than what you have in Sam Darnold. What if you were in charge there, how would you shake that one out?
Trey Lance would get moved. It's not complicated. We overanalyze and complicate the situation. Doesn't need to happen. You go with the guy who you're winning with. Sam Darnold, I don't want to go back. I want to stay on topic, but it was funny. We were just talking about Zach Wilson. I was irritated when the Jets moved Sam Darnold. I wanted Sam Darnold to go to a team and just completely blow up and just show the Jets front office that, you made the wrong decision. Didn't happen. Looks like Sam Darnold's going to be a backup quarterback for the rest of his life. Keep him to help back up. And then Brock Purdy's who you won with last year. And he's on a deal that you don't have to pay him a lot of money, and you let him develop. I'd move Trey Lance.
Gene, if you're another team, is there a team out there that you'd be like, hey, let's take a flyer on Lance, 5th round pick, 6th round pick, bring him in? Because let's be honest, and you've made this point before, he hasn't had the opportunity to develop. It's not like he's been in the league 2 years and we have 22 games of footage on him and he's just as he was as a rookie. He's only played in 8 games, and the majority of those are preseason games.
So I'm looking up the stat right now to see if I can see how many balls that were thrown last year by Josh Allen last year. This is a stat that I find alarming, and why most NFL GMs need to understand how ridiculous this is. Trey Lance has 99 high school passing attempts, 318 in college, 72 preseason attempts, and 102 regular season attempts. In his football career, he has fewer pass attempts than Geno Smith had last year. Like, why are we giving up on this kid? Did you see the throw that he made in the fourth quarter? That he threw a dart 30 yards, 26 yards down the field, right into a receiver in stride who ran and essentially set them up for the game-winning field goal to win the game. I don't give up on Trey Lance. It's not the same thing as Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson, I seen for 2 years out of BYU. I seen for a full year as an NFL starter. Not a full year. He took a couple games off, but the book is not complete on Trey Lance. He's too special of a talent for us to say just get rid of him. Let's talk about Brock Purdy. You brought Brock Purdy up. Brock Purdy was 4 for 5. He looked efficient. I think the reason Kyle Shanahan likes him so much is because he runs his offense, right? He does what Kyle wants him to do. Drop back, throw it here. If this is not here, throw it here. Brock Purdy does that, right? Good game manager. He was Mr. Irrelevant for a reason. Go back and watch the Iowa State tape. Him versus Iowa is brutal. If you watch the Iowa State-Iowa game in his last year at Iowa State and you think he's an NFL quarterback, by all means. Kyle Shanahan is great at getting what he wants out of that offense. I don't think Brock Purdy's the answer. I think the interceptions in practice will continue. And the one thing that no one talks about, because you just look at the stat sheet, is on that drive in San Francisco, he took a really bad sack in the red zone on his only drive, which led to a field goal. They didn't get to put the ball in the end zone. Took a bad sack. I'm not a Brock Purdy guy. I think the 49ers start the season, and this is just as honest as I can tell you. Week 1 with Brock Purdy as their starter, and they go to Pittsburgh and they get shelled. I don't think the game's close. I think Pittsburgh destroys them.
And Gene, you bring up a great point. Lance hasn't thrown the football a lot ever. College, preseason, ever. So it also works against him, because what kind of program, the NFL is win now. You bring a quarterback in by halfway through year 2, you need to see something. Otherwise, we're already starting about coach changes, drafting another quarterback. So, Gene, what team has that timeline? Because you're right, there's glimpses there, but it's not something that we're going to see in just 1 year. He probably needs a couple of years in the league, in a consistent system, with a consistent coach, with good people around him, to get out of him whatever that ceiling is. What team can give that to him?
So that's interesting that you say that, right? But I think the answer is still San Francisco. And if it's not San Francisco, I think it's the team that's right next to him with the Los Angeles Rams. because I think Matt Stafford's going to be done after this year. But let me kind of tell you why it's San Francisco. You have no quarterbacks that are being paid any money on the roster. The highest paid quarterback on the roster is still Trey Lance. Sam Darnold signed there for a dime. It's his third destination. If you don't know what you're getting out of Sam Darnold at this point, like we're going to call him Steve Young, like stop it, right? Steve Young sat behind Joe Montana. He wasn't playing in the league, throwing picks and saying, I'm seeing ghost. Let's not make that comparison. It's silly. But you have Brock Purdy, who gets paid nothing as Mr. Irrelevant, and Trey Lance. They have time. They can develop him for his full 4 years and then see what we have at the end of that. He's getting practice reps with a professional football team. But if you want to move on from him, and they probably never will do this because it's inside the division, I think the team that's most set for him is a team that's innovative offensively, that's ready for a rebuild, that has a possession receiver that can truly help him out. And that's the Los Angeles Rams. They're going to stink, guys. The Rams are going to be awful. So why wouldn't Trey Lance go to a situation where you have a possession receiver like Cooper Kupp, you got a deep threat in Van Jefferson, and you have an offensive guru coach in Sean McVay to help bring that talent out of him?
Yeah, I completely
I love that. When I see Trey Lance in San Francisco, I just see something. To me, Kyle Shanahan's system, he's tried with Jimmy Garoppolo, game managers. That's what they've had in San Francisco.
Ryan.
Yeah. Now granted, when Shanahan was with Matt Ryan was still able to move the ball down the field. Now he had Julio Jones and Roddy White and all those other weapons he had. But since he's been in San Francisco, they have meshed with game manager quarterbacks, and I could just see that being one of the reasons why they stick with Brock Purdy and move on from Trey Lance. I agree with Gene. I would take Trey Lance over Brock Purdy all day. But if you're looking at that system and what the San Francisco 49ers are, I'm from Missouri. I'm from the show me state. When I see consistent issues with teams, that's what I go with.
And speaking of Jimmy G has had some issues in training camp this preseason, but he looked decent in the preseason game, above average. He led the offense up and down the field. He looked crisp. Jimmy G is what Jimmy G is. He's a game manager. He can be an above average quarterback when the pieces around him are good to great. He doesn't have great pieces with the Raiders, but the question coming out of yesterday isn't so much about Jimmy G, who did what he was supposed to do as QB1. Gene, it's more about his backup and the noise that his backup quarterback is making with the Raiders. Do you believe the hype after 2 preseason games from the backup quarterback position with the Raiders, or is it just that? Is it just preseason hype?
Well, they better not start. They better start Jimmy Garoppolo. I can't see a world in which the Raiders move on from Jimmy Garoppolo after the stink they made this offseason. I might have to retract my statement about the Raiders being the worst team in football if they move on from Jimmy G. I know me and you think differently when it comes to Jimmy Garoppolo, but I will say this. I think that if they move in a different direction, and I think their backup's Brian Hoyer, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct?
They're looking at the rookie in their team.
Aiden O'Connell.
Aiden O'Connell.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So maybe they move on from. I think Josh McDaniels was trying to buy himself as much time as humanly possible to be the coach of that team. I think he's a snake oil salesperson that's going to fail and fall flat on his face. I truly believe that. I think the Raiders. I said this. They're going to start 1-7, and when they're 1-7, you'll find out Josh McDaniels gets fired, and you'll see a lot of different things. They'll start tanking for Caleb Williams. I think that Raiders team could be dangerous next year with a different coach and different quarterback. I don't care who's on the roster. I think McDaniels is a decent offensive coordinator, a terrible head coach. And I think one of the biggest responsibilities of a head coach is to be able to get motivation, drive, competitiveness, and buy-in out of your players. And I don't think he has that. So whether it's O'Connell, whether it's Garoppolo, whether it's another New England retread, I think that the Raiders are going to be bad this year, however you slice it.
And gentlemen, staying in the AFC West, we are going to move into our last segment of the show, and we're going to talk a couple of divisions, and we're going to predict how the divisions finish and kind of forecast the division outlook for said division. And we're going to start with the AFC West. So Chase, let's start, and this will be a short part of it. We all kind of know what Kansas City is, but obviously Kansas City is the favorite to win that division outside of a catastrophic injury or something that happens to Mahomes. I don't foresee any other reason why they wouldn't win that division. But if you had to highlight any concerns or any flaws with Kansas City going into the season, are you concerned about their wide receiver group? I know we've seen Mahomes do it with everybody, and he's been doing it this preseason with anybody and everybody they throw out there. But if you had to list what potential flaws Kansas City had, would that be the top of the list, even though Mahomes has proven it's not really an issue for him? Or do you see another potential issue with the Chiefs this season?
Not even close, Chris, because of what you said. I mean, Denard Robinson, Albert Wilson. I could go through the list of people that you've never heard of that he's throwing touchdown passes to, and how the offense just works that way. My biggest concern for the Kansas City Chiefs is the front seven. You've got Chris Jones on a contract year; he's holding out. I think that gets worked out, but Frank Clark has moved on. So they don't have a pass rusher on the other side of Chris Jones. They got George Karlaftis, who they drafted in the first round last year, not this past draft, but so he's still kind of getting into it. I don't see him leading the league in sacks or even leading the team in sacks right now. And so Chris Jones and Nick Bolton are the only shining part of that front seven. And that's going to be a huge, huge issue for Kansas City. No longer are the days of Tamba Hali and Justin Houston and Derek Johnson, and even with Frank Clark only came alive during the postseason. That's going to be a main huge area for concern, as well as a cornerback position, which is always a concern for Kansas City.
I think the seventh receiver on the depth chart right now is going to be an elite receiver in the NFL this year or next year. I really believe that. The Kansas City Chiefs have a kid in Justin Ross who I think can be exceptional. And Patrick Mahomes just said 3 hours ago that the kid's special. He's different. I think that he has the ability to be the next cheetah on that roster. That sounds crazy. I understand that. But he is special. I think they'll be fine. The biggest weakness with the Kansas City Chiefs is their defense as a whole. Not just their front seven. I think their secondary isn't that great either. I think that Patrick Mahomes will do enough to get them to win enough games to win that division. I think come playoff time, Spags will have that defense ready to be attacking and to be able to protect that secondary by getting after the quarterback, by giving different designs of blitzes coming after the quarterback. But I think as a whole, I think the Kansas City Chiefs will be they'll still be fine. I just think their biggest concerns defensively, not wide receiver wise.
Yep.
And Gene, you mentioned earlier in the show, the Raiders are going to be one of the worst teams in the league this season. They're going to be competing for Caleb Williams in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes, which means that the middle of that division is potentially still up for grabs between the Chargers and the Broncos. And Gene, we're going to start with you. Do you have faith in the turnaround of Russell Wilson with Sean Payton, or are you putting more faith in Staley, who hasn't proven to this point that with good to great talent with the Chargers, he can win consistently or even fix the defensive side of the ball, despite some of the good pieces he has on his side of the ball? Where are you going for second place in that division?
Well, Brandon Staley has a bone-in ribeye steak, like perfect cut. He's got some really fresh potatoes and some green beans that were freshly cut, cleaned off. He has all the ingredients to make the right meal. He's just not making it right. I think that Kellen Moore going over there is going to help their offense out significantly. And their defensive depth chart, they have stars at every level, whether it be linebackers, defensive line, secondary. They're loaded. Brandon Staley's defensive coach. Maybe just allow him to worry about the defense and see what ends up happening. I think the Chargers still finish second in that division. I don't have faith in Russell Wilson. He still looks lost. He still looks like he doesn't know where he's at. And, you know, a couple guys in my inner circle, we had a conversation about Russell Wilson, and everyone talked about the fall off that happened last year with Russell Wilson. I don't think last year was the fall off. I think Seattle basically gave him away because you don't move on from a franchise quarterback. Why? What would be the reason? I think Seattle gave him away knowing he was cooked 2 years ago. I'm not a Russell Wilson guy this year. I want to have faith that Sean Payton would turn it around. I think you'll see Sean Payton with that team next year, just with a different quarterback.
And Chase, when you talk defense, I mean, let's be honest, the Chargers are loaded top to bottom on defense. The Broncos don't have a bad defense themselves. The Broncos also have a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball, but they don't have nearly the offensive firepower that the Chargers have. That being said, we saw Javonte Williams come back yesterday. Got a couple of carries, handful of catches, which is all you need to see. Just have him out there, have him get hit, have him run some plays. And, you know, hopefully he can return close to his form before the injury. Is there a chance that the Broncos compete for the second place in that division or a playoff spot? Or are you just looking at a 6-7 win team that is never really in the playoff hunt from the get-go?
I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't know. I would like to believe that Sean Payton can do something with that team, but I'm in agreement with Gene. I think Russell Wilson's ceiling peaked the year before Seattle traded him, and I think Russell Wilson should have retired, or at least went to backup status. I think he'd be living a lot more comfortable. But I don't know. You know, I mean, obviously I'm in the AFC West, so everybody and their mother who's not a Chiefs fan has bragged about, you know, Sean Payton going to Denver and Sean Payton, you know, creating a different culture there in Denver and whatnot. But I'm really big on the Chargers. I just cannot stand Brandon Staley. I think Brandon Staley and Josh McDaniels read the same sales book, and they have somehow managed to keep their jobs. I think Brandon Staley should have lost his job. Yeah, I think Brandon Staley should have lost his job when the playoff game between them and Denver, where they were like, this could end in a tie and both teams could make the playoffs. And then, like, we're in double overtime. And I'm like, wait, what is this? How is this happening? So ever since I'm like, why does Brandon Staley have a job? He should have been downgraded back to defensive coordinator. It's mind boggling. So, because I keep wanting to say San Diego, Los Angeles, the Chargers have a better core team than the Kansas City Chiefs. There is no reason why the Chargers and the Chiefs shouldn't split every year. Why the Chargers and the Chiefs shouldn't, you know, I mean, the Chargers should be right there with the Chiefs every single year, because of the immense talent that they have on that roster, and they're not. And I think Brandon Staley is the reason why.
Gene, if things get off to a slow start with the Chargers, would you move on? Would you make the move 4 or 5 games into the season? You know, if you're 2-3 with that team, with that offense, with that defense, and let's say the offense looks good. Let's say the offense is looking good. The defense, for whatever reason, is struggling despite the talent they have. Let's say there's been a couple of coaching decisions where you're like, why did he do that? Would you pull the trigger early in the season if you think it's going off the rails, or do you ride it out till the end?
Well, the Chargers will ride it out, but 100% they should pull the trigger. Chargers ownership, I don't get them, right? You had Anthony Lynn in the building. Justin Herbert had a career year as a rookie quarterback, came out of nowhere, looked great. Anthony Lynn is now the running backs coach for the most successful running team in the NFL, the San Francisco 49ers. You talk about a guy that had them in the right direction and you moved on from them. Now you got Brandon Staley there. Look, you can make that same mistake, right? You can keep Brandon Staley there. You have Kellen Moore in the building, right? Why don't you see what you have with him? If you start the season off 3-4, which you never should be with that type of roster, move on from him quick and see if Kellen Moore can reestablish the season and save the season. Why don't you see what you have with him? Because if you hire a new head coach, he's going to want to fire his coordinators and bring in who he wants. He's not going to want to keep Kellen Moore on the staff. I would move on from him quicker. I thought he should have got fired the week 18 situation between them and the Raiders when both teams could make the playoffs and they didn't. I definitely think he should have got fired last year after blowing a 28-3 lead versus the team that had the number 1 overall pick that previous year in the Jacksonville Jaguars. I just feel like that he gets more opportunities, just like Josh McDaniels does, whereas somebody like Anthony Lynn didn't. And it's kind of confusing, right? Like things that make you say, And
let's be honest, gentlemen, I can see it happening already. The offense is going to be great this year. They're going to finish second in that division. They're going to make the wild card. They're not because of Staley, because of Kellen Moore and what Kellen Moore is going to do to that offense and really tap into. I mean, Justin Herbert's already shown he's great. Kellen Moore is going to make him better. And then they're going to get into the playoffs, and there's going to be a situation where Staley makes a choice, and it's not going to work out, and they're going to lose. But he's not going to get fired because of the body of work of the season, because of how the offense turned around. And I think he's going to reap the benefits of having Kellen Moore on the staff, even though I don't think he's going to be deserving of reaping those benefits because we've seen what he is, and it's not great. But I think he was smart, or the team was smart. Whoever chose to bring Kellen Moore in, I think that's going to buy him a few more years with this team that he probably doesn't deserve, to be honest. Now
they have to re-sign him. This is the last year of his contract.
Let's take a look at the AFC East before we get out of here. Let's start with the hard knock darlings, the New York Jets. The Jets, it's all fallen into place. They add Dalvin Cook to the running back locker room. They already have Breece Hall, but now Breece Hall can take his time coming back from his injury. They have a good defense. They have weapons. Well, they have a weapon in the wide receiver room, but they have some decent pieces there. Chase, is it just the offensive line that Jet fan has to worry about, or are we putting too many eggs into the Aaron Rodgers basket? How good do you think the Jets are actually going to be this season?
I think that them and Miami will compete for the division.
Well, Buffalo, there's still Buffalo in that division.
Yep.
Got it. Okay. So the Jets will be competing for the division. I'm not going to argue. Yeah, I like hearing Miami is going to compete for the division. But, Gene, that brings us to the logical question of can the Bills actually finish third?
I don't think they'll. I think I have the Bills finishing second in the division. I had the Dolphins finishing third, and not for any fault of the Dolphins' own. Outside of, I just don't have faith in Tua staying healthy. Right, he's just too frail to me, and I'm nervous about his health. I mean, one more concussion, it's got to be a retire. Like he's got to retire. It's not about the Miami Dolphins. I really love what they've done offensively. They've built a track team. They have Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devin Achane, Raheem Mostert. They're all track. Like they might be 4 of the top 8 fastest guys in the league, and they're on one offense. I think that I'll give you a bold take. You want a bold take? I think the Jets are in the AFC Championship game with an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl. I think that's how good they're going to be. Don't be surprised if David Bakhtiari is a Jet by the end of this training camp, by the end of this preseason. Don't be surprised if David Bakhtiari is traded to the Jets.
For what? What would the Jets have to give up?
I think they end up, well, see, the thing is this, right? I think the conditional draft pick that they have on Aaron Rodgers is already part of that trade, right? If he doesn't play the whole season, he gets hurt. That first-round pick turns into a second-round pick for him. Why not guarantee the first-round pick? Add a third rounder as a sweetener for a 36-year-old left tackle that can still play football. I would add a third round sweetener and guarantee the first round draft pick. And I think that the Jets pull off a little bit of a heist. They're going to go all in. What are you worried about, right? Like draft the Los Angeles Rams motto, F them picks. Like you have Aaron Rodgers. He's 39 years old. What are you expecting to get out of him in 2 years? You got to maximize it, right? Go all in. Bring Bakhtiari in. They already moved Mekhi Becton down the depth chart. That experiment is over. That guy is soft. He's paper soft. I think you bring in David Bakhtiari, and I think that Instagram story wasn't a joke, right? You've seen the Aaron Rodgers thing where he posted on Instagram where he tagged on the offensive lineman's back David Bakhtiari. That's a really big sign. Like, he doesn't do those things accidentally. I think Bakhtiari comes in there, and I think that they have 4/5 of a good offensive line. I think Rodgers will be able to work with that. You guys don't remember, you guys, I don't know why I just said that, but you guys might not remember the Green Bay Packers lost 3 of their 5 offensive linemen with Aaron Rodgers, and everyone was talking about that. And Aaron Rodgers went 5 wide, spread at defense, and 3-step dropped an entire win. They've done this before. He's done this before. They have the receivers to do that. I think Garrett Wilson has a career.
So, Chase, if you're the Packers, can you make that move?
Yeah,
Can you give to Aaron Rodgers, who left you the way he left you? Can you look at that? And because football wise, if they propose what Gene said, take the emotion out of it, it's a good football move. It's good to have that draft capital. It's good to have that flexibility. But when you put the emotion back into it, now you're like, well, can we really give Aaron that piece? And that would be the only thing holding the deal back. So can Green Bay think emotionless and make that move if the offer is that?
Yeah, absolutely they can, because it's a business at the end of the day. The only people that put emotion into it is we, the fans. Green Bay didn't hold, the Green Bay organization didn't hold no riff with Aaron Rodgers just as much as they held with Brett Favre. The fans hold those riffs. At the end of the day, like you said, Chris, it's a good football move. It's a good business decision. And that's what football is a business. And I love Gene's idea of David Bakhtiari coming in. And I also like Gene's idea of the Jets finishing first. I mean, I'm not as high on him as Freddie Henderson is. I don't think Mahomes is a watered down Aaron Rodgers, but at the end of the day, Aaron Rodgers is still Aaron Rodgers. We're only 2 years removed from him being the league MVP.
He's won 2 out of the last 3.
Yeah. I mean, like, yes, he's 39 years old, but to this notion that Aaron Rodgers is a shitty quarterback or the reason why the Packers didn't make it far in the playoffs is just, it's asinine to me. Like, there's 11 dudes on the field on offense and defense to put everything on one guy in this sport. I think people do it for clickbait. It's really easy to do in the field that we're all in, with everybody wants a hot take or whatever. And that's fine. But Aaron Rodgers is still one of the greatest quarterbacks to play the game. He's still one of the top elite quarterbacks in the NFL today. And I think putting him around a great defense like the New York Jets had is exactly why he won a Super Bowl in 2010 against the Pittsburgh Steelers that everybody thought they would lose. Now, granted, Aaron Rodgers is a lot older. I mean, that was 13 years ago, but I think Aaron Rodgers shocks a lot of people, and I think Aaron Rodgers is great for Zach Wilson.
All you had to do last year was watch a few Packers games. Look, I got NFL Plus. I have all 22. I watch every game every week because I'm nuts. I get it. But all you had to do is watch a few Packers games, and that will tell you that Aaron Rodgers didn't have a bad year throwing the football. Statistically, might have. Just watch the first play of the season. The first play of the season, he throws a 46-yard dart that should have been a 75-yard touchdown right in the hands of Christian Watson. The ball gets dropped. You had a 4th-round rookie in Romeo Doubs, a 2nd-round rookie in Christian Watson, and Al Lazard was hurt for the majority year, and the ghost of Randall Cobb. That was his receiving last year. Guys, it's not an Aaron Rodgers thing. It was a Green Bay Packers thing.
Gentlemen, on paper, and again, and obviously you guys know where I fall when it comes to who's winning that division. If Tua stays healthy and Allen stays healthy and Rodgers stays healthy, on paper, it is going to be a slugfest between those 3 teams. Because when all 3 of those teams are operating at what their ceiling is, they could easily, any one of those 3 teams could be one of the best teams in the league. Now, obviously, they all have flaws, right? Miami's probably has the 3rd best defense of the 3, but they brought in the guy to fix their defense. If there's going to be one guy to do it in a season, it's going to be Vic Fangio. They brought in other pieces. They have pieces there. But when you look at both sides of the ball for those three teams, you could see any one of those three teams lighting it up consistently. And obviously with Miami, it's going to be Tua's health. But the one team that we did not talk about in that division is Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. Are we completely discounting the Patriots from doing anything this season? Because if all three of those teams are competing potentially for the division, that means all three of those teams have a shot at making the playoffs. So, Chase, where does Belichick and the Patriots fall in that conversation? Are they just slated to finish last no matter what?
I wouldn't say no matter what, but I mean that's where I'm going with right now. I don't think that they have the pieces to keep up with the other three. I think they still have Bill Belichick, and I think they'll have some surprising wins. They may play upset at the end of the year, hurt somebody's playoff hopes in the division, and that's about it. I don't. Mac Jones.
But Gene, Mac Jones had he had a good rookie season. So is it fair to say Mac Jones has the potential to be above average and lead a team to a division title, or not in this system?
History repeats itself very often. All you have to do is look back 10 years, and you can see what Bill Belichick is going to try to do with that offense. What did they bring in this offseason? Mike Gesicki. They already had Hunter Henry. They also brought in Ezekiel Elliott. They have Ramondre Stevenson. If you don't think this team's running 11 personnel all game, 2 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, and a big, powerful running back, and controlling clock, controlling the sticks, and relying on their defense, you're not paying attention to Bill Belichick. They went out and drafted a cornerback, Christian Gonzalez, kid special. Very nice addition to that secondary. They still have Matthew Judon. Their defense is still going to be competitive. I think this is the second best division in football behind the AFC North. I think all 4 teams in the division can compete. And don't be surprised. I've been telling Eagles fans everywhere, do not just mark down week 1 as a W going into New England. I don't understand where you think that Bill Belichick just lost the luster of being a top NFL head coach. He's very intelligent. He does a lot of really intelligent things. Now, to address Mac Jones, come on. Last year, it was embarrassing what they did offensively. Their offensive play calling was terrible. They revamped that. They brought in Bill O'Brien. I think that as a whole, the Patriots will be a better offense, and I think they'll look better. They brought in Juju Smith-Schuster to be a wide receiver weapon for them. They obviously still have Devontae Parker. I think Mike Gesicki gives them another option because Mac Jones has shown that he likes throwing to the tight end with Hunter Henry. I think the Patriots will compete. I'm not writing them in 4th just because. I think an injury, whoever has a team that has a major injury will be the last team in this division, no matter who it is. Don't be shocked if it's Buffalo. I could really see Josh Allen getting hurt the way he plays football. And I'm not wishing injury or predicting injury on anybody, but who are the Bills without Josh Allen? Could you imagine how bad that team's going to be if Josh Allen misses 4 games, 6 games?
They're Matt Barkley. We know who they would be. We saw it.
I cannot believe that Matt Barkley still plays in the NFL. That's a whole. I would go down a rabbit hole talking about Matt Barkley still playing in the NFL. And to Gene's point, I mean, I could see it. And as sports fans and as analysts, even myself is guilty of this. We don't like the non-sexy teams. I mean, I'm a Chiefs fan. I love the sexy, the dump off passes, the 70-yard bombs, all that stuff. That's sexy football. I agree with Gene. I think with what the Patriots have done, they're going to be very boring and it's going to be non-sexy. I think they're going to do run, play action, run, play action. And I think they are going to beat a few teams like that. Like I said, I don't know if they'll make the playoffs, barring any serious injury to the other 3 teams. But I think that they find a rhythm doing what, playing good defense and playing conservative offense. Just like how they remember how everybody complained about the Super Bowl with the Patriots and the Rams, because all the Patriots did was run the ball, dump off passes to Julian Edelman. And everybody was like, the Super Bowl was boring. I could see that this year. Everybody watches Bill Belichick barely make it in or make it in because of an injury to one of the other AFC East teams. And everybody's like, they shouldn't be in because they didn't have, Mac Jones doesn't have 3,000 yards passing. They just have power running backs that get first downs, field goals, and a little bit of touchdowns thrown in.
And don't forget, this is
the
same team that ran 40 plus times against Buffalo in that game. And they realized early that they had to run it, and they ran it down Buffalo's throat. And I don't think they're going to run 40 plus times in, games this season. But to your point, that Belichick's going to do what he thinks is the right thing to do, not what he's being pressured into do.
Yes.
So Bill Belichick said something to Chip Kelly when Chip Kelly was in Philadelphia. And Chip Kelly was basically the loudmouth Bill Belichick in a sense that he didn't hold any cards in. Like, he would basically just repeat it. But like, he studied under Bill Belichick. That was like the guy that he wanted to be most like when he was coming into the NFL. And it was a line that Bill Belichick told Chip Kelly that just really remains evident is big people beat up little people. And the Patriots built their offense of being big people, right? You have Ramondre Stevenson, Zeke, Gesicki, Hunter Henry. They invested first-round draft pick capital and offensive lines 2 out of the last 3 years. The New England Patriots are going to try to push you down the football field. 3-4, 3-4, 3-4, 3-4, right down the field. And I don't think Bill Belichick can't put that together. And once you start really stacking the box to try to stop that run, you got a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster who can run, beat you right over the top. Devontae Parker, jump ball guy you can throw the ball up to. That's the offense they're going to run. They're going to reel you in, and they're going to try to hit you with that X-play.
And let's not forget, Bill Belichick, has had the entire offseason to prepare for the Philadelphia Eagles. And don't think that he doesn't know that he would probably be, if not but one of the biggest headlines coming out of week 1 if the New England Patriots knock off the defending NFC champions. That would easily be one of the lead headlines coming out of the first week of the season, because the national narrative is Mac Jones is trash. Look at all the talent in the AFC East. Bill Belichick has lost a step. He doesn't know what offense is. That's the national narrative. So if he welcomes in Philly and gets out of there with a win, that's a huge headline coming out of week 1. Even though we're all smart enough to know that's not going to dictate the next 17 weeks of football. But for week 1, that's what Belichick's looking to do. He's looking to come out, establish that he can win his way against a really good Philadelphia Eagles team, and then try to keep it moving from there.
Chris, what was the Eagles' Achilles heel last year?
Run defense?
That's 100%. Their Achilles heel last year was run defense. They brought in anybody they could. Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh. They were trying Jordan Davis. They drafted in the first round. Their Achilles heel is run defense. They like to get after the quarterback. They like to peel their heads back and get after the quarterback. If you don't think the Patriots are going to run the ball 35 to 40 times with Ramondre Stevenson and Ezekiel Elliott, you're sadly mistaken. That will be a football game. That'll be a close football game. And if you're an Eagles fan out there, don't panic, because you'll be fine. But if they lose week 1, I won't be shocked.
All right, gentlemen, the Sunday morning drive has come to an end. Another successful week in the books. Make sure that you are, first of all, if you're watching us today, hopefully you liked us. Hopefully you are following us on social media. Hopefully you're subscribing and clicking all those things you need to click so you can have us be a part of your life every Sunday. Before we get out of here, though, Gene, you got a pretty cool fantasy football thing coming up today later on, don't you?
In 45 minutes, we will be having an 8-team, 8 people all live mock draft of 18 rounds. Like, we went nuts on this, right? It'll be 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 3 flex positions, and a defense, plus H bench players. We're going to give in-depth analysis. 7 out of the 8 guys I know personally, I've been in fantasy leagues with personally, and I know they know their stuff. And I'm sure the 8th guy from all the sports I've talked with him knows his stuff. So you got 8 guys that really know what they're talking about football-wise. So if you have a fantasy football draft coming up, give us a listen. I promise you, you'll have fun. It'll be a fun live stream. Just a live stream, just podcasted fantasy football talk.
And Chase, it's a pleasure having you on a show, sir.
I know it's a pleasure being back. So hopefully, the Sunday morning drive, hopefully, this is the beginning of many again. It's good to get back into the mix of things. Yeah, man. Love everything we got going on here at the Sports Empire Network. Have made some changes the past few weeks, and I'm really digging where it's going. Chris, you got that killer show. That's on tonight, right?
That is tonight.
Prove
Me Wrong is on tonight.
Yes.
If you haven't seen it, come be a part of it tonight. Literally, I just bring in some of the most intelligent minds in sports to mock me and ridicule me. That's the goal of the show. They literally just come in and tell me how I'm wrong, and then like the sadistic side of me that loves getting my ass kicked, I give them points for it. I give them points and trophies for making me look foolish. It really is a great time. If you haven't seen that, 9 p.m. Eastern tonight, come be a part of Prove Me Wrong. It's one of many fantastic shows on the Sports Empire Network. But gentlemen, on behalf of Gene and Chase and Chris, who was here with us earlier for the opening segment, thank you so much for being a part of us this morning. Make sure you're here next week when we take another Sunday morning drive.